invite all of you to sit over there, and I will give you the floor.
Yeah. With a first round or very short round, I mean, 3-4 minutes each, right? Something like that.
Yes, and
Then we open discussion.
then we will open.
Okay, very good.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this session on EOSC contribution to research assessment. Can I please ask you to have a seat so we can start? Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to chair this session on EOSC contribution on research assessment. And I will briefly present the agenda of this session. We are a little bit late already. So we will have first 3 introductory talks, one from Michael Arendorf, Head of Unit Open Science at the DG Research and Innovation of the European Commission, and we'll talk about the ERA Action 3 on research assessment. Then we will have from remote the presentation from Lydia Borrell-Damin, Secretary General of Science Europe, and she will talk about the COARA commitments for research assessment. And last talk will be from Gareth O'Neill on research assessment at the EOSC Association. Gareth is the principal consultant Open Science at Technopolis Consulting Group in Belgium. After that, we will have a panel discussion, and we will invite the 3 previous speakers, plus Nino Rotolo, full professor at the University of Bologna, former vice rector for research in the same university, and Giulia Malaguernera, outreach and engagement officer at OpenAir, for an open discussion, and with the panel discussion, and then we will have an open discussion with the Oh, okay. Oh, sorry. Okay. And then we will have a discussion with you in the room and with people that are following us from remote. So what about this session? This session is really looks to explore how EOSC contributions can influence, shape research assessment practices by emphasizing openness, collaboration, and the integration of diverse research outputs, and how EOSC can contribute to the development and implementation of open science indicators that can be used in research assessment. And with this, I'm very pleased to give the floor to Michael. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Maria Luisa. I'll try to go very quickly, grabbing the device. Thank you. Over the first couple of slides, also because I know that Lydia is with us online and she is part of the steering board of Coara, and get very quickly to my last slide, which is exactly about the relationship between EOSC and reforming research assessment. So here on this first slide, I should say that we started this initiative back in 2020 when we proposed how the new European research area should look like. So this was already on the table 3 years ago. And then during 2021, we did very wide consultations to come out with what we call the scoping report for the principles behind reforming research assessment. And then we spent the first half of 22 together with stakeholders to facilitate a stakeholder-driven agreement on a number of commitments to be followed in experimenting with new research assessment criteria, tools and processes. This was issued in July, and as of 1 week ago, there were more than 600 signatories to this agreement. At the same time, we established the basis for an alliance of those who had signed the agreement, so that together they could move as a critical mass in terms of reforming criteria, processes and tools for assessing individual researchers, research organizations and research projects. And this is now very much coming to life because the first wave of working groups under Coara, under this coalition, will be starting very soon, and some have already kicked off. Lydia will tell you much more about that, I'm sure. Very briefly, but you probably know this, this is about going beyond the very narrow set of indicators that are typically used today, the journal impact factor, the H-index, and also your ability to attract funding to your research institution are the most significant indicators for how your career progresses, for how the research organization is assessed, and for how research proposals are also assessed. Rather, of course, the vision of this reform is to recognize that researchers do much more, many more activities, produces many more outputs that are of real value for science. And we would like this reform to recognize that the assessment should look at all of that and reward those that give rise to higher quality and higher impact of the research. So this is moving towards an assessment system which is much more qualitative in nature, but of course also is based on certain quantitative metrics rather as yardsticks to support the qualitative judgment. Again, I will not go in detail. I will leave that also to Lydia. And instead I will focus more on what we do also in the Commission, where we see that we are in a privileged position. And I think maybe the most important thing is that, yes, we have been supporting a stakeholder-driven agreement and coalition. And as I explained, the members of this coalition will be experimenting with new ways of doing research assessment and learning together what works and what doesn't work. But at the same time, there needs to be also a fit with national framework conditions, so that the organizations that are part of the agreement and the coalition are not hitting the wall. If certain national framework conditions, be they legislative or administrative, are hindering such a reform. So we in the Commission, we are in a privileged position also to chair the ERA Forum of national authorities. And through that, we also facilitate the organization of national activities, national events that bring together stakeholders at the national level to discuss exactly how the bottom-up movement and the top-down conditions would meet, so that there are no contradictions, no hindrance of reforming research assessment. I don't know why there's a box missing in the upper left corner, but it doesn't matter. This was what I was talking about, that we are seeing ourselves as liaising between the agreement and the coalition and the member states in terms of setting the national or the regional framework conditions. We are also there because the Commission has signed the agreement. We are we are a member of the coalition. So we are also there mainly as a research funder to learn together with other research funders, and there are some, I think more than 40 research funders that have signed the agreement and are part of the coalition, to see how we can exchange experiences, how we can learn from each other. And of course, from our point of view, it's in view, I would say, mainly of the next framework program, but also any adjustments that could be made in the last half of Horizon Europe. So we are there also as a, if you like, a normal member, but mainly as a research funder to take part in these activities under QARA. And also we have some privileged seats on various international fora, the Global Research Council, just to mention one of them, where we would also be promoting the principles behind research assessment reform. Going back to what is put forward in the ERA policy agenda 22 to 24, we set ourselves three goals, three deliverables. You could say that definitely the first one is completed. The agreement was ready for signature in July last year. The coalition was established on the 1st of December last year, and now we are taking part in the activities under the coalition to share together with other research organizations and research funders our experience with the reforms, and as I said, also to make this link with the national authorities in terms of the framework conditions at the national level. Now, thinking about how all this relates to EOSC, I think there are three important quotes to mention. The first one is that one of the 10 principles we established back in November 21 refers exactly to the need to have an independent and transparent data infrastructure, have also independence and transparency of the criteria that underpin research assessment. And this is also where EOSC comes in. Other keywords from this principle behind the research assessment reform is the control, the ownership by the research community. That also allows those that are being assessed to have access to the data that underlies their assessment, to have access to the analysis, and to have access to the criteria that have been used to assess the performance, either at the individual level or at the organizational level. One of the 10 commitments also referred to the fact that whatever experimentation is done with the criteria, tools, and processes need to be backed up with evidence in terms of what is working and what is not working. And here again, EOSC can help in the sense of having a look at what is the impact of a certain research output over time. I should also mention the third one here, which is where member states is definitely behind. This comes from the Council conclusions of last year, which very much talks about the same thing, the need to have independence, openness of the data and of the indicators that are used to assess research and researchers. So, if we take a step back and look at the two relationships between EOSC and reforming research assessment, and first looking at how can EOSC as such contribute to the goals of the research assessment. And I think I would mention four things. The first one is that it can help to establish alternative metrics. So going beyond the journal impact factor, the H-index, and looking also at how data sets are quoted, pieces of software as well. Secondly, and I mentioned that already, EOSC can help to judge what is the impact over time of a certain research output. Thirdly, and I think this is very important also when we think of EOSC as a federation that cuts across countries and institutions, that it can help to harmonize how research and researchers are assessed at the individual level, at the institutional level, and at the national level. And then fourthly, obviously also that EOSC is already by design cutting across disciplines and cutting across national borders. So again, having some kind of harmonization to the extent that it makes sense across disciplines and across borders in terms of assessing research and researchers. In the other direction, we also very much believe that reforming research assessment will help with the uptake of EOSC by the research community. I put here on the slide a project that we have launched recently, but I will not say more about it because Julia is here and she will talk a lot more about GRASP OS. And I realized I should also have put, of course, Opus here because Gareth will talk about Opus, which is about reforming research assessment, but more specifically on how this can incentivize open science practices and the uptake. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And now we ask Lydia. Lydia, are you online?
Yes, I am online. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you well, so you can manage yourself to present your slides. Thank you for being with us, although from remote, and thank you for starting your presentation. Please.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria Luisa, for the introduction. And I'm really sorry that I cannot be with you. I'm sure it would be fantastic to be in Madrid for this very important event. So I would like to thank the organizers for their flexibility in allowing me to be here participating with you online. So let me share my screen to share the slides I've prepared to share with you today. Let me see if that works. Is that correct? But maybe no, that's not correct. Sorry, it's not the right one. Hello, where are you? Sorry, I had it ready and that is gone now. Excuse me, yes, this one it is. Yep, and I think I have managed to put it in presentation mode. Is that correct? Can you confirm that you can see it?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. Well, so thank you very much, as I said, and thank you, Michael, for this introduction. I will explain a little bit more the context in which we are working to address open science in general, and perhaps a little bit more specific research data and the research assessment reform. First, I start with a disclaimer in the sense that the life of COARA, which is mostly what I speak here on behalf of, is very short. So we don't have yet solutions, ready-made solutions, or huge insights on the links between the reform of research assessment and research data. But I will do my best to explain you the context in which we are working and how we plan to have links between EOSC and COARA.
Lydia, so, sorry to interrupt you, but it's not in presentation mode, your slides.
That's very strange because I have to stop sharing. Let me try again.
We could see your slides, but not in presentation mode.
Let me check again. Can you see that? Can you see those slides?
Yeah.
But not in presentation mode.
Not yet in presentation mode. Not yet in presentation mode.
Okay, I try again.
Yes.
Is it in presentation mode now?
Click.
Yes.
What happened?
For me, it's in presentation mode.
No, we cannot see anything. So maybe it's better that you...
I share again. That you can see. That is in sharing mode now for me.
Wait a moment.
Can you see it?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
I don't know why the presentation mode doesn't work for you, because for me it is in presentation mode.
As long as you are able to... It's okay. Let's go on. Let's go on.
Okay, okay. So I come back to the slide where I was. No, oh jeez, it's a disaster. Okay. Yeah. It's very slow, I think. Anyway, in any case, that's the slide that I was in. Sorry, it doesn't work. I don't understand. For me, it is in presentation mode, so I don't know why you can't see it in presentation mode. Anyway, sorry for the glitch. What I was saying is that we have a short, thank you. We have a short life in Quora, therefore not really able to say much about how we plan to go about the links between research data and research assessment. But certainly we have a lot of background to establish dialogue and collaboration. We have, on the one hand, the dialogue that led us to the Quora commitments, as Michael explained. We have also the long-term dialogue that led us to EOSC, started back in 2015, 2016, and the task force on research careers recognition and credit, and as well as, of course, the mutual mutual principle that open science is should be the norm in the new assessment criteria that we develop, which should become the norm, open science. In addition to that, we have a series of recommendations and values that we have developed from Science Europe. I will tell you a little bit more about that. Which we did it in the Recognizing What We Value report that was published last year. And as also Michael hinted, we have a global forum, which is the Global Research Council, with a group dedicated to responsible research assessment that is also addressing the need for the reform of research assessment. So we need to make sure that we link up with those initiatives to build on our synergies and to avoid unnecessary repetition. I move to my next slide. I hope that this will be visible to you. What I think it is important in the context of EOSC is, and in establishing the dialogue with the European Open Science Cloud, is that we have a difference in the structure, in the nature of the organization. EOSC is a membership organization, is also an initiative, it's a partnership, is supported by all member states in the EU, while Quora is a non-membership fee-based coalition. So we have members, but we call them members, but they do not pay a fee, and the affiliation is voluntary. And then we have a working group dedicated to infrastructures and to research assessment. These are working groups that are just being put in place because we concluded not so long ago the assessment of the proposals received, and they are just now starting their activities. So I do hope to come back to you sometime next year with more proposals and more outcomes of the activities that would just are now starting. Nevertheless, I do think that there is opportunity to establish links between the EOSC, as they are national initiatives within EOSC, and the Quora national chapters. At this point, not every member state has a national chapter, but there are already 5 or 6, and more on the pipeline. So it could be a good idea to link up at this level to go further into how we can reform research assessment. A few words on behalf of Science Europe, saying that we are tackling research assessment in a very comprehensive way and around a series of core values that we identified and we put in writing in 2022. We put a series of 6 values highlighting autonomy and freedom, care and collegiality, collaboration, equality, diversity and inclusion, ethics and integrity, and openness and transparency. We believe that these are very important values to have in mind when thinking about the reforming research assessment, to have very clear in our minds what are the principles that are guiding the reform. Because it will be very difficult. It is very difficult, this reform. We are very happy that in Coara we have more than 600 members, but we know that there are many reasons to get engaged in these organizations. Some are there to be really front runners, some others to catch up, and some others are just there to see. So I think that having a core set of values for us to have quite present in our minds when going through the reform is very important. Also, I want to highlight the work that Science Europe has done in the past, specifically on the practical guidance for research data management plans that dates back from 2021. And that was a guide that had previously been, in a previous edition, promoted by Horizon Europe. And that was generated already at that time with the dialogue and contribution from universities, national research funders, national research performing organizations, and research infrastructures. And the document that we published in 2021, which you have the link is embedded in the slide, offered core requirements for data management plans with very clear aspects, 6 in particular, that every data management plan should have, criteria for the selection of trustworthy repositories, guidance for researchers, and guidance for reviewers. I don't go into any details for now because I have a very limited time, but if you like, we can go more in depth during the discussion. In any case, that is just a reference because more work needs to be done now in the framework of research assessment, which at the time of publishing this guideline was not so not so strongly developed as Coara. Now, just to finalize, just a few words saying that we are very happy that we have more than 600 organizations. It is true that they're mostly European at this point, but Coara was born with an intention to be clearly an international organization, truly global, and we are making many efforts to engage organizations across the world. I know there are other organizations dealing with research data such as RDA that are already connected worldwide. So here's a call for us to work together and to link up the efforts and to try and promote the principles of Coara for the research assessment and work towards more guidelines to how to embed these also in assessment systems for recognizing non-traditional outputs or like less traditional outputs for research, being data sets, being software, codes, and etc. And I would leave it here. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Lydia. Thank you also for giving us the information about what has been done in Science Europe. And now I give the floor to Gareth, and Gareth, I'm sure that you will be on time with your presentation.
I will cut this short. No pressure. And I just check if you can show the screens on the monitor here as well, please. Or not, and I will turn around. Okay, so I'll keep this short and present some of the work that we are doing in the Task Force on Research Careers, Recognition and Credit that Lydia already mentioned. This is at the EOSC Association, organization based in Brussels, representing the EOSC community. I think they've now already over 200 members from research performing organizations, research funding organizations, and service providing organizations. You can grab the QR code and save ourselves a lot of time, so I can cut this. We are one of the 13 task forces working on different aspects of EOSC and open science, helping to develop policies and practices for the association and towards the Commission, especially with regard to the EOSC partnership, developing the calls. This particular task force looks at incentives and rewards for researchers to manage and share the research activities, processes, and outputs, specifically looking at what does it mean for research assessment in terms of EOSC and vice versa. We are around 30 participants from the members and observers of the EOSC Association, as well as experts in the EOSC community. It is co-chaired by myself and Gustav Nielsen from Karolinska Institutet, and we also work closely with the board, especially Wilhelm Widmark from Stockholm University Library. We're currently working on a position paper on EOSC, focusing on how EOSC can enable research assessment and also how research assessment itself could help support researchers to engage, use EOSC, and ultimately drive the uptake of EOSC and open science. I'll stop there so we can move on to the panel.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So this big applause is for the whole task force, represented here by Gareth. So please, I ask the panelists to come to the stage. And I want to give the floor first to Nino to give the, to give the insights from the university point of view and also the university league point of view on research assessment.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me. Pleasure. Yes, try to be short. Yes, university perspective, actually, one of the main points is what was the object of this research assessment, right? What type of research assessment we are talking about? It was mentioned before, but this is important for us, for the university. So you can evaluate, you can assess projects, you can assess researchers, you can assess institutions, and and if you shift from one context to another context, things change and change a lot. Also, researchers, when you speak with researchers, they say, what's the purpose of your assessment, right? This is one of the reasons why if you run in a campaign of a rector, never touch research assessment, because you will lose. So that's a rule, basic rule in all universities in Europe. Never discuss in the campaign that. It's a very hot topic, right? So what's the purpose of research assessment? And within the university perspective, of course, if you, metrics are perfect for assessing institutions. They are okay with projects, but are definitely not enough for the career researchers. And that's a point of the discussion, right? So, because any metrics you use is quantitative, and quantitative methods are not sufficient. You should use qualitative methods. And then what's the alternative or peer review? The peer review, that you need good reviewers. That, is a huge problem within the university. And the research institution, but that's one of the core points of the discussion. So in the perspective of EOSC, for example, one important thing is working on the quality of research data and the fact that data are rich. And you have a rich data in terms of metadata, including indicators for the impact of research. And impact of research means many things. Scientific impact, for all types of research activities, but also economic impact, societal impact, ethical impact. The impact is not a matter of the data analysis, but it's also a matter of the data structure, right? So you have to work on both levels, right? So this is another important thing. A third point is the scope of the research data, right? This is a big issue in the research communities, which is, for example, SSH, social science and humanities, where having research data is a challenge, right? And if you want to have a rich data for research, you need integrated data. One issue is transdisciplinary links among research data. And if you want to have transdisciplinary link among data, then you need to include SSH, not only hard science, social science, not only STEMs, for example, right? But the status of on sharing research data in a broad sense in that part of research is just in the beginning, right? We mentioned ethics, for example. How can you do that without integrating data in that perspective? And the final point that I've stopped has to do with the institutional setting for that. In the institutional setting, you have, of course, Commission, member states, independent research assessment agencies, and scientific communities. Just one sentence that I stop, in member states, the relationship between governments and agencies sometimes is not so smooth, right? And independent research agencies collect input from scientific communities. All these players should contribute and should sit in all European discussions, all these together. Because the final question is harmonization. Different levels, but harmonization is not possible if not all these players are taking part in the challenge. Thank you.
Thank you, Nino. And before starting with a question from the audience and from remote, I want to give the floor again to Gareth first, and then to Julia to present the project. So Gareth, please.
Thank you. If they can also pull up those two short slides. I'll take off one hat, put on another hat now. This is from the Opus project, where I'm the scientific coordinator. This is a Widening the ERA project to incentivize and reward assessment in open science. So what does it mean for doing open science in terms of, doing research assessment in terms of open science? I'm going to stand up because I can't read that. So what we're ultimately doing in this project is trying to develop a framework for researcher assessment. So now we're very specific in the level here. We're focusing for now on individual researcher assessment, whether that's, for instance, in a grant application or the management of the grant project, or whether that's in job application or an annual cycle of career checking and promotion within the university. So it's covering all aspects, but specifically individuals. That's not to say that the framework could not be scaled up. It could, but as you go up higher and higher, you have to start adjusting your framework, your indicators, your metrics, and so forth, and your criteria. We have a couple of guidelines that we have taken as a starting point to develop the framework. We already have a first version of the framework online, by the way, which is also coming soon. So we focus on individual researchers. We are looking to develop indicators and metrics for RPOs and RFOs specifically. This framework should be at a relatively high level and flexible to implement so that it's across countries, across disciplines, across organizations. They can take from this toolbox what they will and adjust it to their own needs and interests. We will combine both a qualitative and a qualitative approach. In our view, it's very hard to have one without the other. The numbers typically are useless without some kind of context, and very often the context alone is not enough to understand exactly what the researchers have done or how they've spent their time. In that respect, we do not just look at publications or citations or other activities linked to the publication. We look across the full spectrum of researcher activities. This is, in essence, what they're doing collectively, so we need to understand all of these activities and outputs and try and take this into account. Also, this is not just about open science. There are many activities and outputs that researchers do that are not open or potentially should not be open or maybe could be opened at a later point. So to try and include both the non-open aspects and give options for the openness where relevant for the researchers and the institutions. Implementation here should be flexible, so there is a lot of leeway for the organizations to implement. And on top of that, this should be supported by interventions at the RPOs and RFOs. It's not enough to implement it. They need to also support the researchers in doing this. You can take the QR code if you want to meet more there, by the way. Doesn't seem to work on Mozilla today, so sorry for that. Next slide, please. Just to give you an indication without going into the framework too much, this is the first version. What we have broken up all the activities is essentially into 4 categories. Research, of course, the big one there on the left. We have then what we call education, so teaching, supervising students, developing course materials, developing yourself in professional development. We have what we call leadership, which basically includes here managing people or managing projects or managing organizational units at an organization, or even recognition from the research community for your expertise. And the last one is this EU buzzword valorization for science communication, intersectoral engagement, citizen engagement, and I think it's like IP exploitation. A very broad framework. It's not that everybody should do this, no individual would ever do all of this, but it's that they can find themselves in the activities that they're doing. It's then for the institutions to select from this, prioritize it, and weigh or balance across what the individuals are doing.
Thank you, Gareth. And now is the turn of
Thank you.
Julia.
Yes, thanks. Okay. Thank you. I will do a brief presentation of what is GraspOS. So basically, why GraspOS exists. It's to provide an infrastructure to collect the data and make a data space to provide an alternative that is non-commercial for what is already existing in terms of research assessment at the level of the institutions or commercial infrastructure that already exists for monitoring or assessing the research that is basically based on metrics. So what we are doing in GraspOS is to develop, assess, and put into operation an open and trusted infrastructure that is providing the next generation research metrics or indicators, and maybe. The research metric data space is a collection of data, tools, and services that are already present in EOSC. And we are assessing at the 3 levels, from the individual and group researchers, and we are collaborating with Opus to find the indicators and the metrics that can be used at this level. But also we are assessing at the level of institutions, so we have pilots that are working with us at this level. And then at the countryside. It means that also funders are involved in our pilots. So what we are doing is that we have 3 pillars of action. So we have this assessment profile framework that in which we are collecting the data that can be used for the infrastructure to provide indicators. We have, from one side, services that are producing this kind of metrics, and they are measuring indicators that can be used, such as citations, downloads, use of EOSC services. And then also we have a front end to provide the service and access to these indicators. And this is GraspOS at a glance. So we are ready for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Julia. Thank you very much for all the panelists. And now the floor is open for questions. There is already a question in the back.
2 questions, 1 remark. Andrea Scharnhorst, being also a scientometrician for all my sins, I would very much like to see more studies which are source critical whenever we go to a new kind of indicator. And I think it's very interesting to look into the history of quantitative studies of science. So if you read the essays of an information scientist of Eugene Garfield at the beginning of the citation indexing, you see how careful they kind of argued on automatization of bibliographic references before they were able to propose any kind of indicators. I'm very much aware about the tension that we need to have new indicators, and we cannot wait for fundamental research to sort them all out. Yeah? But I also know that Science Europe has indicated a lot of explorative studies, and I happen to know that because our former director at DANS, Peter Dorn, was part of a group doing this, looking into how reliable the sources on research data are. Yeah? So what do you count? What is the data set? What is the repository? What is the how? And so on and so on. So I think that is my remark. I think it would be very interesting to have more critical studies on that. My question is, or my two questions are concerning grasps. Yeah? So what is the relationship of this database to other things like OpenAlex, which I see discussed a lot in quantitative studies, or dimensions? And they both kind of commercial, dimensions for sure. OpenAlex is kind of semi-open, at least they say they have an open API, and I see studies on them. So I would be interested in looking into this. And then being also involved in DARIA, where in the ERIC forum, there is a lot of discussion on key performance indicators. And whenever we start filling those sheets, I'm getting a bit sick because it requires a lot of work, and it's not clear to which purpose we're actually collecting all those indicators. So I think it would be very interesting to seek for also a discourse between looking into assessment for EOSC, looking into assessment for ERICS, basically for everything which you could place into the input of science corner. Yeah, so quantitative studies long have looked into the output kind of the science system. And we are now more looking into the input again. Could we not coordinate that better? Who would be a stakeholder to take that up?
Okay,
the question is for you. That's true.
Thank you for your question and your important input. So in GraspOS is also run with OpenAIRE, and in the OpenAIRE graph, which is a knowledge graph, as well as OpenAlex, we are discussing at the RDA level in the working groups how we can merge these important input and metadata inside a knowledge graph. So in that case, we are working more on the level of the knowledge graph in the database. We still don't have a clear answer to this. What we want to do is collecting as much information as we can in order then this kind of indicators flows in this data space, and we are asking the community and the community of practice that now we are launching in GraspOS. So if you want to participate, we will be very happy to have your input and your experience inside our project, even if as collaborators. Thanks to this kind of information, we can also speak with our pilots and other stakeholders, also at the level of the working group in Coara, to understand what kind of indicators can make sense in some particular activities. So maybe for the research infrastructures, you would like to measure the downloads, the citations, and you would like them to be open. The citations are not always open, and this is what we are working also thanks to Open Citations, which is part of GraspOS. And this is like an example. But of course, we are happy to having you in our working groups and in our community of practice.
Thank you, Julia. And I think that Gareth wants to add something.
Yeah, maybe just to add, when I spoke about the framework, and then especially for individual researchers, we should just draw a distinction between the framework itself at a high level, how that is translated for a specific institution, and then how that's translated for the researcher. Because ultimately the researcher will have to fill in data, whether that's on a document form like my old university, or whether that's in some form of digital interface. And of course, it could be a lot more user-friendly in the terms and terminology and requests than a standard data sheet. The other point there is that the researcher will probably have to fill in a lot of the information there themselves, which they do anyway. But of course, if you're using specific indicators or metrics linked to publications, data sets, software sets, peer reviews, ... you would try to get that from an external source, either external or perhaps an internal CRIS system, or perhaps from the research graph. But then, of course, it still comes back down to the trustworthiness, quality of the data source you're using. So for the graph, for instance, we know that the confidence at the publications level is quite high, but it gets much more difficult when we come to open data sets, software sets, and let's not even go into fair data sets or peer reviews. So I think there's going to be a couple of years of pushing and shoving there, finding the right indicators and metrics, and seeing how much the researcher themselves should have to fill in. It shouldn't take a week of their time, or that itself should be in the system. And then, of course, trying to improve and help them in that with automatic numbers that come in that they can check and clarify or just click yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Are other questions from the audience? There is a question online. Before giving the floor to the question online, I have a question myself for Michael and also for Lydia. Lydia, you mentioned in your slides the research management and governance, which I think is very important. Also, Commission launched an ERA Action 17 on research management. Actually, the open science needs really a cultural revolution to be, to become a reality. So how research management have a role in this process of, research, and what is the link also with research assessment?
If you want me to start, or Lydia, I can start. Definitely the research managers, or in more general terms, the leadership of the research organization has a key role. At some point in time, you need to go to the hierarchy to say, we have done a lot of experiments, we have the evidence that this is working in terms of changing criteria or tools and processes or structures for assessing research. They have a key role in making it happen in the end. But we should also say, and I would like to highlight two keywords, which is underlying the agreement. One is the autonomy of the research organizations to decide themselves. It depends on the mission of the organization. It could depend on the particular goals of a project that are being assessed, or it could depend also on the discipline, for which assessment would be different. The other key word is coherence between the different levels, which was touched on before. And here again, the research manager or the leadership has a key role. On one hand, they are being assessed as an organization against a certain set of criteria. They need to make sure that there is, well, if not coherence, then at least non-contradiction between those criteria and the criteria they use for assessing their institutes or individual researchers. So a key role, and as you said, a link to the other ERA action, which is recognizing the role of research managers also in other contexts.
Yes, maybe if I may add to what Michael said. Is it okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to add that indeed the profession of the research manager, or professions I should say, because there are many professions under this umbrella term of research manager, is a matter of concern for Coara in the framework of that broad recognition that we want to give to different types of researcher careers. They not all have to be researchers, let's say, in the lab. Being in the lab doesn't matter if life sciences or studies on art. So I remember earlier this year, I was in the EARMA conference in Prague, the European Research Managers Association, and they had lots of questions for Coara. And I was there together with my colleague at the European University Association, Stefan Bergmans, and we made a joint presentation. And that they have the same, in that sense, as they also contributed to Coara, they have this, we have this same objective to broaden the range of recognition of research careers. There are many PhDs that are engaged as that data stewards, that are, because of their expertise, they are engaged in assessing research data management plans. They provide added value to the research profession, and that is a type of career that today is far from being well recognized, and they suffer quite a bit from that very legitimately. So I think that, yes, it is important and we must pay attention to that. I don't know exactly in the order of priorities, but that is definitely a task for Coara to involve research management as a career in research as well.
Well, thank you very much for your input. My personal view is that research management is not only management of research project, but is something more, more broad, and as also Michael said, should involve, it's also on the shoulders of the, leaders, yeah? And not only of universities, but also of research infrastructure. So let's give the floor to the question from
yes, there is one question.
From remote.
There is one question from one of the online participants. Is Coara aimed at further developments and practices related to open science, or is Coara's role in making open science the norm optional? The participants have noticed that open science perspectives are not necessarily a given when actors interpret Coara.
Lydia?
I was going to ask Michael if he wants to go first, or should I go first? Yes, okay. Well, yeah, there are several, that is a complex question, in fact, because on the one hand, the reform of research assessment cannot be seen only through the lenses of open science. It has to be seen as a reform of research assessment. Made open or not, the way research is assessed today is considered old-fashioned, obsolete. Anyway, it needs a reform. At the same time, we have a very strong line of thinking that science should be more accessible and much cheaper to access for researchers. Therefore, it's only natural that when we consider the reform of research assessment, we integrate open science as part of this development. So it's a little bit more nuanced, I think. Both open science policies have their own life. Research assessment has its own life as well. In Europe, we have an increased number of countries that start to implement laws in universities or at national level that are fostering open science policies more and more. There are yet not many laws on research assessment, and I don't know if there will ever be. This is just to say that these are two large initiatives that the research community is working on, and they have a meeting point.
Thank you, Lydia.
In fact, sorry.
No,
I was just going to say that in the working groups, we are making sure that there are open science consideration in every working group of Coara.
Thank you. And now, Michael first, and then Nino wants to comment also. No.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is that it's true that it was triggered from us, from open science policy point of view, because we thought that in order to accelerate the uptake of open science practices, this is a fundamental enabler. But of course, and we realized that, of course, also from the beginning, but in particular during consultations, it's much broader. It's not open science policy only, it's really about research policy. And at the end of the day, it's all about what we value and what leads to higher quality and higher impact of the research. So it goes beyond open science. Just to mention, for instance, rigor in methodology, the ability to verify the results, the ability sometimes to reproduce the results. This makes the results more robust, so higher quality of the research and down the line, higher impact of the research outputs.
So thank you. I think the last word to Nino.
No, very short.
And then we have to close because we
very
have
short. Yes, thank you. I mean, you mentioned
already over time.
Yeah, you mentioned the data management, research management. Actually, that's an important issue. We need competencies. You know, finding fully qualified people around is difficult. If you try to recruit data steward in your institution, that's a nightmare. So I think the final word from the university perspective is training, training, and training. All effort for developing training programs to create fully qualified people, it's so important. Thank you.
So thank you very much. I don't know whether there are other comments. Thank you also to all of you for your patience. We are over time, but I think that, yeah, the EOSC contribution to research assessment is in promoting open access to data, fostering collaboration, enabling enhanced metrics, and ensuring long-term preservation and integrating with existing assessment system. So thank you very much, and have a good lunch.